My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 34 years old, and last year I resigned from my family's multi-million-dollar company over dessert. That night still replays in my head, like a movie I didn't audition for, but somehow starred in. The flicker of candles, the scent of rosemary roast chicken, the perfect illusion of a close-knit family celebrating another milestone. And then, with the clink of a wine glass, my father casually handed my entire professional future to someone who had never earned it. My little sister, Heather. Not 50%, not a shared vision, no conversation beforehand, full ownership, just like that. Before I can continue my story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You have to understand how deep this cut. Eastbridge Creative wasn't just a business. It was my third sibling. Born in our garage back in 1995, nurtured with hustle and midnight faxes. I used to fall asleep to the sound of my dad dictating notes into a recorder. By the time I hit high school, I was filing invoices and tagging along to networking breakfasts. That's not childhood, that's onboarding. So when Dad said Heather will be inheriting the company, we believe she'll bring a fresh perspective. I didn't just hear a bad decision. I heard erasure. The tension in the room was brutal. Mom sipped her wine like it might turn into water if she held it long enough. Heather smiled that breezy way she does when she thinks things are going her way. I stared at my father and waited for the punchline. It didn't come. Heather's creativity, paired with Brandon's business acumen, Dad continued referencing her fiancé, like that somehow made it better. We think it's the next evolution for Eastbridge. I looked down at my plate. Dessert hadn't even arrived. I placed my napkin carefully beside it and said, "Excuse me." I walked out the front door without a coat, my breath blooming in the cold Denver air. That was the night I stopped pretending loyalty to blood was the same as respect. The next morning, I submitted a 2-page resignation letter, effective immediately. No theatrics, no snark, just a USB drive full of transition documents and a message for HR I won't be back. There was one obligation left, a strategy session with Rockwell Industrial, our biggest client. I showed up, nailed the pitch, smiled through the pain, and left without saying goodbye. The receptionist teared up as I handed in my badge. Derek, our marketing director, met me in the hallway and said, "Rachel, please tell me this isn't because of Heather." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That evening, I stood in my apartment, staring at the bottle of Malbec I'd been saving for a celebratory moment. This wasn't the celebration I imagined, but I opened it anyway. That first sip didn't taste like freedom. It tasted like mourning. There's this myth in family businesses that legacy equals entitlement, that blood automatically qualifies you to lead, to inherit, to be trusted. But what people never see is the second generation who chooses to earn their place instead. When I was 10, Eastbridge Creative Strategies was a folding table in our garage and a phone line that disconnected every time someone turned on the microwave. It started with my dad, Charles Morgan, big ideas, bigger dreams, and an iron will. My mom, Linda, ran invoicing from a desktop PC in our laundry room. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. We were building something. I knew it, even back then. By 13, I could explain the difference between a brand identity and a positioning statement. At 15, I was designing PowerPoints for client pitches. I didn't resent it, I craved it. Every win felt like mine, even if my name wasn't on the paperwork. When I chose Columbia for my MBA, my dad said, "Don't think you're getting a corner office just because you're my daughter." And I didn't. I came back and started at $42,000 a year as a strategy associate. Cubicle, shared printer, no perks. My first few months, I cried after work twice a week, not because it was hard, but because I wanted so badly to prove myself. Prove myself I did. The big break came when Rockwell Industrial, then just a modest $400K client, was looking to expand west. I stayed up 3 nights building a strategy that integrated infrastructure trade routes and regional data overlays. It was part logistics play, part market incursion. They loved it. We closed a $3.2 million contract within 90 days. That win bought me credibility. And more late nights. I became director of strategy, then VP. By 30, I was Chief Strategy Officer. The clients came not just for our name, but for my name. Rachel Morgan meant something in industrial B2B. People trusted me because I knew what I was doing and I listened. Heather didn't see any of that. She was always the fun one. Studied media theory, took time off to travel through Greece with her college friends, launched a podcast, then quit it. Took some design contracts, dropped them. At one point, she made stickers on Etsy. My dad called that entrepreneurial spirit. I once worked through the flu because we had a client renewal meeting I couldn't risk postponing. Heather once canceled a shift at our own firm because her aura felt off. Still, I never competed with her. I just figured we had different lanes, different lives. I assumed stupidly that my decade of sweat equity revenue results and reputation would speak for itself. That one day, the company would quietly become mine in the way that made sense. I didn't need fanfare, just acknowledgement. Instead, they gave the keys to someone who had never even been behind the wheel. And I was told, literally told, you were just doing your job. Those words still knock the air out of me. That's when it clicked I had been building their dream, not mine. And the moment I was no longer useful to the narrative they liked, they erased me. So I made a vow that night knees drawn to my chest wine glass, balanced on my radiator, I would never again invest more in someone's vision than they were willing to invest in mine. Heather Morgan always had this way of floating through life like a leaf on a breeze, drifting pretty occasionally, landing somewhere unexpected. She wasn't malicious, she was just light. And my parents always treated her like that was a virtue. When we were kids, I remember her dancing in the living room in a tutu while I sorted receipts for Dad's tax prep. Mom would beam at her like she was the sun reincarnate. When Heather painted something vaguely abstract at summer camp, it got framed. When I won the state debate championship, it got a polite dinner. For years, I thought that contrast was just birth order. I was the older sister, the responsible one, the workhorse, and Heather was the creative, the one we all silently agreed not to burden with expectations. Only somewhere along the line, being unburdened turned into being chosen. She got her degree in digital media, whatever that means, and spent the next several years trying on careers like dresses at Nordstrom. Content curator, travel vlogger, social media manager. She joined Eastbridge 3 times over the years, each stint shorter than the last. Always just consulting or helping with the vibe. The vibe didn't need help, the quarterly reports did. When Dad announced his succession plan, the words he used were carefully selected. Heather brings a fresh perspective. She's got vision. I almost laughed. Vision, she once called our client intake process intimidatingly logical. I designed it to prevent multimillion-dollar screw-ups. And then there was Brandon, her fiancé. Brandon Lewis, MBA holding, Patagonia vest-wearing, crypto-rambling son of a Boulder investment guy. I can't prove this, but I'm fairly sure my dad saw him as a male proxy for the son he never had. Brandon had pitched a vertical expansion strategy for Eastbridge during a backyard barbecue once. I still have the napkin he scribbled it on. It involved lifestyle branding for logistics clients. When Heather and Brandon walked into that Sunday dinner beaming, I should have known. Should have read the energy. Should have clocked the way Mom clutched the wine bottle tighter than usual. How Dad spoke with that overcompensating formality he reserves for announcements. But I didn't see it, not until it was too late. And what gutted me more than the decision itself was Heather's response to it. I have so many ideas, she said, eyes wide, voice bright. Like we can totally revamp the color palette. It's kind of sterile right now. That sterile palette. It was part of an award-winning identity system I spent months researching, testing, and defending. Our clients liked it because it projected stability, professionalism, and technical confidence. But none of that mattered. Not to Heather, not to my parents. I was efficient. She was inspiring. I stood in the hallway after that conversation, hand on the framed hallway photo of our first office lease, and realized something I hadn't dared to think before my family loved me for what I could do. They loved Heather for who she was. And in a legacy business built on image and tradition, that meant she won, even if she had no idea how to run the thing she'd been handed. So when she smiled and said, "I hope you'll stay on and help me transition into the role," all I could do was nod politely, walk out of that house, and decide I'd rather start from nothing than help someone else ruin everything I built. I didn't sleep that night. at least not in any way that felt restorative. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation in Dad's office, like it was the final episode of a show I never wanted to be in. "You've done an excellent job, Rachel," he'd said, reclining in his leather chair like this was just a quarterly check-in. "But that was your job. What we paid you to do." Those words hit like a slap. Not even a dramatic one. A cold, dismissive one. It wasn't about inheritance or ownership anymore. It was about how little they valued the 10 years I'd poured into Eastbridge like a second soul. By 4 a.m., I had drafted my resignation. I typed it in Google Docs, reread it twice, and saved a copy on a USB. I didn't rage quit. I didn't burn the house down. I left them every file, every open contract, every asset tag cross-referenced and labeled. It was surgical, professional, final. At 7:42 a.m., I dropped the envelope on my father's desk with the USB attached. Our office receptionist looked up from her desk as I passed and gave me a confused half-smile. I didn't stop walking, but there was still one obligation left, one that couldn't be passed off or postponed. At 2:00 p.m., I met with Patrick Dunham, CEO of Rockwell Industrial Group. He was the kind of man who dressed in dark suits even on casual Fridays and called people by their last names on purpose. We had a rapport built over years of mutual trust. Rockwell accounted for $9 million of our annual revenue. That was nearly half of everything Eastbridge brought in. I showed up to that meeting in my usual monochrome blazer, armed with quarterly insights and a refined growth strategy. Patrick didn't know I was resigning. I didn't want it to color the conversation. For 2 hours, we discussed supply chain constraints, market volatility, and retargeting strategies in new Western markets. He nodded, scribbled notes, occasionally grunted his approval. As we wrapped up, he stood and extended his hand. "Ms. Morgan," he said, voice even, but direct. "You're the reason we stay with a firm your size. You understand our business. I hope that doesn't change." I shook his hand. "Appreciate the trust, Mr. Dunham." And then I left walking out of that glass conference room for what I assumed would be the last time. Back at my desk, the slow process of detachment began. I pulled down the framed photo of our first Rockwell Team Summit, unscrewed the plaque from my desk drawer, packed the coffee mug Thomas got me after I landed the Clearwater contract. I left the Eastbridge-issued laptop on its dock. Wiped. Just as I zipped up my leather tote, I heard a voice at the door. "You're really leaving?" It was Derek, eyes dark, jaw tight. I nodded. "It's time. This is about Heather, right?" I gave the standard corporate answer. "I'm pursuing other opportunities." He rolled his eyes. "Rachel, don't do the PR dance. Half the team's freaking out. Rockwell's going to notice. You are Eastbridge for them." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The last thing I saw as I turned in my badge was a draft of Heather's email announcement on someone's screen. It was titled, "A New Chapter Begins." The audacity of that title made my jaw tighten. She didn't know what chapter we were on. She hadn't read the damn book. It took less than 72 hours for the cracks to show. By the time I'd settled into the discomfort of unemployment grocery shopping in the middle of the day, replying to recruiter emails I wasn't ready to answer, Eastbridge had already started unraveling. Word travels fast in small industries, and even faster when the vacuum left behind is the person half your client roster trusted with their budgets. The first whisper came from Isaac, the creative director. A cryptic text, "You would not believe the rebrand pitch we just sat through." Turns out Heather's first official act as CEO was to eliminate private offices and turn our workspace into an inspirational creative collective. Translation, she had desks removed, ordered beanbags from an online startup, and installed free expression zones that confused both HR and fire code regulations. One of them blocked the emergency exit. She replaced our project management system, a meticulously built timeline-driven platform I'd helped implement, with something called Moondrop. It prioritized emotional checkpoints over deadlines. No one knew how to use it. Clients didn't know how to read it. The dev team was ready to mutiny. Then came the client emails, real ones, frantic ones. Apparently, Heather had decided to personally connect with our top accounts. She called it a fireside reset. Rockwell's follow-up meeting, Heather pitched a campaign featuring drone footage and handwritten mission statements for a company that specialized in industrial concrete. When Patrick asked about analytics, she said, Sometimes we have to lead with heart, not numbers. She also nixed our quarterly strategy check-ins, said they felt corporate. Those check-ins were the exact thing keeping clients like Bradshaw and Clearwater on board during volatile markets. Then I got the second text. This time from Maya, the senior account exec. Rachel. Heather told Dunham our methodologies were outdated, called them too metrics-obsessed. He walked out. Flat out said he won't renew if you're not running point. I reread that message 4 times. Eastbridge had just lost Rockwell. $9 million, gone. It didn't stop there. Heather started hiring consultants, branding people from her Instagram circles who used phrases like authentic aura building and vibe-first strategy. None of them had B2B experience. Most didn't even know what a procurement cycle was. The team spiraling. Derek was running triage with 2 interns and trying to backpedal explanations to angry clients. Maya updated her LinkedIn headline to exploring new opportunities within days. Isaac started taking lunch breaks that lasted 3 hours. People were quietly reaching out to competitors. And Heather She was redecorating, swapped out framed client testimonials with abstract art prints and whiteboards featuring words like manifest and pivotitude. It was chaos. Not slow-burning behind-the-scenes chaos. It was visible, loud, morale-draining entropy spilling from the top floor down like someone had knocked over a gallon of bad ideas and didn't bother to mop up the mess. I sat on my couch in sweats, watching it unfold like a movie where you know the ending is going to suck, but you can't look away. And yet I still hadn't picked up the phone. I told myself it wasn't my mess to fix, that I was free, that I owed them nothing. But the knot in my stomach disagreed, because the people falling through the cracks, they weren't just colleagues. They were the same people who stayed late with me on RFP nights, who caught my typos, covered my meetings, and made Eastbridge work. And they were suffering under someone who thought strategy was just another Instagram aesthetic. The calls didn't start with hi. They started with sighs. Long ones. The kind people exhale when they don't know how to say what needs saying. Rachel, Marcus Chin said, barely a whisper on the other end. It's bad. Marcus had been our senior designer for 7 years. Meticulous, unflappable, the kind of guy who used color theory like a second language. He wasn't one to panic. Heather's gutted the workflows, he said. She fired the accounting firm because they asked her to justify an invoice for $30,000 in creative retreats. She's talking about scrapping the entire strategic alignment model. You know, the one you built. The one that works. I closed my eyes. That model had become Eastbridge's signature offering. It translated chaos into structure-linked marketing KPIs to business outcomes and helped clients see the value in hard, sometimes unsexy decisions. Without it, we were just another boutique agency trying to go viral on vibes. But it wasn't just Marcus. Over the next 2 days, my phone became a hotline for the disillusioned. Maya called. Heather told Clearwater that brand consistency was a constraining energy. Rachel, they paused their campaign. We're about to lose them too. Derek sent me a voice note. She's pitching fashion brands now. I'm not kidding. She said we should expand into lifestyle marketing because industrial is too limiting. That's literally our bread and butter. The dev team walked out of a meeting. Isaac's thinking of quitting. They weren't exaggerating. One by one, the foundation was cracking. The old guard was burning out. The new hires didn't understand the language of our clients. And the clients, God bless them, were starting to ask the one question I had hoped wouldn't come up. Where's Rachel? It was Isaac who finally broke me. He called during dinner. No preamble, just she sent Martin Dunham a campaign proposal with no metrics, none. It was 6 slides of mood boards and poetry. He asked for the quarterly benchmarks, and she said, quote, I don't believe in data-driven creativity. He said if he doesn't speak with you by next week, he's pulling Rockwell for good. I pressed my hand to my temple. The salad in front of me wilted untouched. My fork sat in the bowl like a monument to restraint. And then came the final blow. Thomas Grant, my former strategy partner. He called that Friday, his voice low-tired. It happened, he said. Dunham walked. No warning, just... He stood up, handed Heather his card, and said, if Rachel ever returns, tell her to call me. 8 million. Gone. Just like that. Silence. She tried to blame us. Thomas continued. Said the campaign team didn't prep her. Then blamed the reception staff. The reception staff, Rachel. I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered, "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry," he said. "Just do something." I sat in the quiet for a long time after we hung up. The hum of my fridge, the click of the heating pipes, my own breath shallow and sharp. I had left to protect my dignity, but now the people I respected most were collateral damage. The company I built was turning to dust under someone who had no idea what it meant to build in the first place. Still, I hadn't heard from my parents. Not until that night. 8:47 p.m. "Rachel, we need to talk. It's important." I didn't respond right away. There were 3 more texts that night, each one a little more desperate than the last. 9:22 p.m. "Please call me back. This affects the livelihoods of people who care about you." 10:15 p.m. "I know you're upset, but this is bigger than a disagreement. The company is in serious trouble." And finally, at 11:03, the phone rang. I stared at the screen. Dad. His name looked unfamiliar in that moment. I answered. "Rachel!" His voice was different, raw quiet like someone had wrung out the air in his lungs. "We've lost Rockwell," he said. "I know." A pause. "Of course you do." There was silence between us for a long moment. It wasn't the angry kind. It was the kind filled with things we'd both been too proud to say. "What you might not know," he continued, "is that Bradshaw and Clearwater are about to leave too. We're looking at a 70% revenue drop, payrolls at risk, vendors, the building, everything. Everything we built, he meant. But he still didn't say you built." That word stuck in my chest like a burr. I asked, "And what does Heather think about all this?" He hesitated. "She's not handling it well. She wasn't prepared." I almost laughed. Of course she wasn't. But I didn't want to gloat, not yet. He cleared his throat. "I'm calling to ask for your help." That sentence shouldn't have felt satisfying. But it did. In a dark, quiet, cathartic way. "My help," I echoed. "You mean from the person who was just doing her job?" He winced audibly, even through the phone. "Rachel, what do you want?" "To stabilize the situation, to help bring back structure, clients, confidence. We'll discuss terms, ownership authority. You'd have a real stake, just don't let it collapse." It was a smart pitch. He didn't ask me to save them. He asked me to save the people. The 30-something employees who showed up every day, now adrift. "I'll think about it," I said. "That's all I could promise." "Thank you," he whispered. "That's more than I deserve." And he was right. The next morning, Mom called. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice wobbled with well-rehearsed remorse. "We're so sorry for not recognizing your contributions." Pause. "But Heather is devastated. She's young. She made mistakes. And your father, his blood pressure is through the roof, Rachel. He hasn't slept in days." There it was. Emotional manipulation wrapped in motherly concern. "I spoke with your dad," I said. "I'm considering my options." She didn't like that. "Your father mentioned offering you ownership. 20% is very generous, considering a—" "No," I cut in. "The circumstances being that the company's on fire and I hold the water hose." She was quiet. "I'm not doing this for pity," I said. "Or because you're scared. If I come back, it'll be on my terms, not yours." Mom inhaled sharply. "Please just think about it, please." After the call, I texted Jenna, my best friend since college. She agreed to meet for lunch. I needed a clean pair of eyes on the mess. Over a sandwich and a Diet Coke, I laid it out. Every painful piece. Jenna stared at me like I'd grown horns. "So let me get this straight. They handed the company to your sister, she tanks it, and now they want you to come fix it for 20%. I nodded. "You're not actually considering that, right?" I didn't answer. Jenna narrowed her eyes. "Unless you're planning to walk back in and take control. On your terms." That was the first time I said it out loud. Exactly. I arrived 15 minutes early. Westfield Coffee wasn't our usual spot, too exposed, too public, but that was the point. I didn't want anyone flipping tables or storming off. I wanted a table of witness and daylight. I chose a corner booth near the window. It smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso beans, and the table wobbled slightly when I leaned in. Perfect. I pulled out my legal pad and clicked my pen twice. The list was short but sharp. I wasn't here to be coaxed. I was here to negotiate. At precisely 1:00 p.m., they walked in. My father looked tired in a way I'd never seen before. Not age tired, weight of regret tired. His khakis hung looser than usual. His shoulders curved inward. Mom wore her let's make peace face, tight-lipped and brittle around the eyes. Heather trailed behind them, dressed like she was going to a startup retreat, cropped blazer, big earrings, no laptop. We sat. No one ordered. Dad opened his mouth, but I stopped him. Before we start, let's be clear. This isn't a favor. This is a business conversation. I'm not coming in to help unless we're talking about authority, equity, and long-term structure. Mom nodded too quickly. Heather crossed her arms. I continued. First, I want 51% controlling ownership. Not symbolic, not phased in, full. Dad blinked like I'd thrown cold water in his face. That's a lot, he said. It's non-negotiable, I replied. I'm not risking my time or reputation unless I control what happens next. You handed the keys to someone unqualified. I'm not returning just to be her seatbelt. Heather let out a dry laugh. Oh, come on, this is extortion. No, I said calmly, this is leverage. And if I wanted revenge, I'd let the company crash. She didn't respond. Neither did Mom. I turned back to Dad. Second, Heather steps down from executive operations. She transitions to community outreach and special projects, no direct client oversight, no budget authority. Heather's mouth fell open. You can't just demote me. You think I wanted all this to fall apart? I thought I could grow into the role. You thought wrong, I said, and now the company's bleeding. Mom tried to interject, but I kept going. Third, you two. I motioned toward my parents retain 34% ownership. You sit on a board, but no operational involvement. You gave away the company once. You don't get to run it behind my back. Dad opened his mouth, then closed it again. I could see it, the slow understanding that I was not bending. Not now. And fourth, I said we install 2 outside advisors on the board. Experienced. Independent. Their votes are equal to ours. No more family echo chambers. The table fell into stunned silence. Outside the window, someone walked their dog past a delivery truck. Dad spoke first. If we agree to these terms, how fast can you stop the bleeding? I leaned in. I start tomorrow. First call goes to Patrick Dunham. I believe I can win back Rockwell with the right narrative. Then, I stabilize the internal team. Bring back key staff, implement structure, rebuild trust. Heather shook her head. You're acting like I ruined it all on purpose. I think I said you were put in a position you weren't ready for. That's not your fault. But staying in that role, that is your responsibility. For once, she didn't argue. She just looked down at the table, lips pressed tight. Dad exhaled. Give us the weekend. We'll get our lawyer to look at this. If we can agree in principle. You have 1 week, I said. Otherwise, I'm gone. For good. And I have other offers. He nodded, shoulders sinking. Understood. As they stood to leave, Heather surprised me. She touched my arm lightly. For what it's worth. I didn't know how hard you worked. I just thought, I don't know, that it would be easier. It never is, I said. The signatures were dry by Thursday. I had them scanned, notarized, and filed before the sun hit my kitchen window. 1 copy for me. 1 for my lawyer. 1 delivered directly to the Eastbridge office via courier, addressed to whom it may concern, just to twist the knife of irony a little. I didn't walk in with a parade. I didn't let HR send a welcome back memo. I came in through the loading dock entrance at 6:45 a.m., holding 2 iced coffees and a notebook full of triage plans. The building smelled like printer toner and stale fear. Thomas met me in the hallway. He stared like he wasn't sure if I was real. Are we doing this? He asked. We are, I said. But not the old way, and definitely not their way. My first act wasn't ceremonial. It was practical. Call Patrick Dunham. He answered on the 3rd ring. Ms. Morgan, he said, the hint of a smirk in his tone. Did they finally come to their senses? I control 51% now. New board, new guardrails, same strategic spine. If we were to revisit the partnership, I'd offer a formal probationary trial, 90 days. Your terms. There was a pause. Then, come by Tuesday, bring numbers. Click. That was the first domino. By the end of the week, Bradshaw and Clearwater had agreed to meetings. Maya returned from what had been labeled indefinite leave. Derek canceled a second interview elsewhere. I brought back Marcus on a consulting basis to rebuild the data architecture Heather had emotionally realigned into chaos. Heather stayed quiet. She relocated to the 2nd floor, where the community outreach team was headquartered. The beanbags disappeared overnight. So did the mood boards. To her credit, she didn't make a scene, didn't sabotage anything. She even offered to draft our press release about recalibrated leadership. I declined politely. I didn't want spin, I wanted clarity. The internal reorg started fast and hit hard. I met with every team, every department. I asked what had broken, what had survived, and what they needed now. People were cautious at first, unsure if this was just a temporary fix, or if the whiplash would keep coming. I didn't overpromise. I just showed up, every day. I created a new position, Director of Client Retention. Gave it to Maya. I brought in a fractional CFO to audit everything Heather had touched. It wasn't sabotage, just naivete. But naivete can kill a company faster than fraud. Our board held its first official meeting 2 weeks later. Janet Blackwell, former CMO of a logistics conglomerate, joined Richard Delgado, a business ops consultant, with no patience for drama. The meetings were long, blunt, transparent. It felt like breathing air again after weeks underwater. I changed the org chart, implemented structured performance reviews, rebuilt the onboarding process, rewrote our values, not the ones that had lived in frames, but the ones we actually lived by. One line stood out printed in bold at the top of the rollout doc. Merit over comfort, accountability over legacy. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I was building something better. Heather surprised me one day in the kitchen. She was wearing flats instead of boots and carried a folder instead of a vision board. I met with the director at the community foundation. She said, eyes level. They're interested in a co-branded literacy campaign. I think it aligns well with our outreach goals. For a second, I just stared. She wasn't posturing. She was trying. That's good, I said finally. Send me a one-pager. She nodded, left the folder on the counter, and walked out. Progress, not perfection, but I'd take it. 1 year later, I stood in my office, my real office, with the blinds half drawn, and a fresh cup of black coffee cooling beside my laptop. I looked out over the open floor plan I'd helped design, now humming with people who had stayed, returned, or chosen to build something with me. It didn't look like it used to. It looked better. Eastbridge Creative wasn't just stable, it was thriving. Revenue had rebounded to $18 million annually. Rockwell was not only reinstated, but had signed on for a new 5-year expansion strategy, including overseas operations. Clearwater re-upped. Bradshaw renewed on a 2-year advisory retainer. We even signed 2 new industrial clients through cold referrals, proof that the market trusted us again. Our alignment model, the one Heather once called metrics obsessed, had been refined, branded, and legally documented as proprietary IP. It became our selling point. Our story. The board structure was working. Our quarterly meetings were sharp, strategic, and mercifully drama-free. Janet once told me, "You run this place like a woman who's been told no, one too many times, and decided to build her own gate." I took that as the highest compliment. My relationship with my parents shifted, carefully. Dad apologized not in a press conference way, but one night over dinner, quietly and without prompting. When I gave the business to Heather, he said, not touching his water, I was repeating a mistake I swore I never would. My father did the same. Gave his plumbing company to my older brother, said it was tradition. And I accepted it because that's what men did. I didn't think, I just inherited the logic. I'm sorry, Rachel, I really am. It didn't fix everything, but it cracked the shell. We started having dinners again. No business talk allowed. That was the rule. Mom followed suit a few weeks later. She cried more. Said things like, I should have said something, and I thought keeping the peace meant doing what your father wanted. I didn't press. We'd had enough confrontations for a lifetime. As for Heather, she found her place. Eventually. Director of Community Relations wasn't just a padded title. She grew into it. She created a corporate giving program that got us featured in 2 regional business magazines. She hosted charity events with fluency and warmth. She smiled easily again, but there was weight behind her eyes now. Real-world weight. And she respected me in a way I hadn't felt from her before. One day in the hallway, she stopped and said, "You know, I wasn't ready, and I didn't know how much I didn't know. Thank you for not letting me ruin what you built." I didn't say you're welcome. I said it's what we're building now. And that was the truth. Because it wasn't just mine anymore. It was ours, but only because the structure now respected merit, not birth order. Experience, not ego. Most of all, I wasn't seeking approval anymore. Not theirs, not the industry's, not the world's. I had walked away once. And it was that decision, not my return, that changed everything. It taught me that value doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself even if no one else does. And now I run a company built not on legacy but on earned trust. And I do it with clear eyes, a full inbox, and zero apologies. Have you ever been passed over, not because you weren't good enough, but because someone else fit the narrative better? Maybe you were the one who stayed late, held the line, did the work, only to watch the spotlight swing elsewhere. I know that feeling. And I also know this walking away isn't failure. Sometimes it's the clearest way to demand respect. And when you do come back, if you choose to come back, you'll know how to write your own terms. If this story hit somewhere deep for you, I'd love to hear your version in the comments. What did you walk away from? Or better yet, what did you finally walk toward? Please like, subscribe, and share this with someone who's forgetting how valuable they truly are. And remember, knowing your worth is the first step to receiving it.